Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the Fantasy Riot podcast. I'm Justin Humphrey, publisher of all things Fantasy Riot.
I'm Ryan Bromhead. You can find me at Fantasy or Flight on Twitter.
Today we're going to just jump right in. We want to do some division previews. It's been a long anticipated podcast for us. The first one we did got lost. Then my internet went down for a couple days. And today my computer's been acting up, crashing. So we're excited to finally get this going and get it recording. As always, we are sponsored by Blindside Football. You go to blindsidefootball.com. They'll take care of your fantasy football needs. They got everything you need over there. Real quick, I just wanted to say we have two new writers over at Blindside joining us, at The Fantasy Mate and at Roto_Project700. So give them a follow on Twitter. Make sure to follow along on Blindside for all the new articles that come out. And let's just jump right into it. So we're going to go ahead and start off with division previews. And we wanted to start off with the AFC East just because it's near and dear for us, the Miami Dolphins down here.
Miami Dolphins.
So let's just go ahead and start up with the Buffalo Bills. So the first thing that comes to mind, I think the first player that we think of when we think fantasy implications would probably be C.J. Spiller. So Spiller's coming off a year, as we know, kind of let down for a first-round draft pick. Currently going in about the third round or so. How do you feel about Spiller this year? Are you comfortable taking him in that spot in the third round?
Third round, I would be comfortable taking him there. I don't see Fred Jackson, taking many touches from him. I'm not sure. Are they? They're not doing a committee over there.
No, well, it's interesting because now they have Bryce Brown, and there's been rumors once they got Brown, there's like a rumor that they've been trying to get Bryce Brown for the past year or so. So Bryce Brown, formerly a Philadelphia Eagle, a very competent running back, and there's already been some reports in off-season and early training camps that Bryce Brown may take some touches away from Fred Jackson. And Jackson, how long is he going to be drinking from the fountain of youth? Every year we kind of get into that discussion where is he going to be over the hill, or
he's got a few years left and he's got to maintain his health. So we might not even see the.
Yeah. So with the potential of Spiller, I mean, when you see a guy who can average 5 yards a carry and average 9-10 yards a catch. If you can get him in the third round, I mean, I can't really complain about that. I know a lot of people who has a bad taste left in their mouth.
Yeah, he averaged 4.6 yards
last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's likely to touch the ball 20 times per game.
Yeah, they said that again. They said that last year, that they were going to feed him until he throws up, and now they're saying again that they want to get him 20 touches a game. The problem with these, smaller backs is just the durability. So if you're going to feed him the ball that much, is he really going to stay healthy for 16 games?
Yeah, he's not really a receiver threat either. He only had a total of 185 yards last season.
Yeah. So speaking of the receivers,
no touchdowns, only 2 touchdowns on the season, which
2 touchdowns altogether.
Yeah, like you said, was good.
Yeah. So Sammy Watkins, you mentioned receivers. Sammy Watkins is someone that can be a focal point in this passing game where they think this is going to be the main weapon on the offense. I'm not a huge rookie fan. I don't buy into rookies too much.
Yeah, you can't put too much stock into him.
But he is, a difference maker, right? So he is someone that could potentially make a difference on that offense.
One notable thing that I've read is that him and Emmanuel aren't necessarily on the same page. And I know Watkins said himself that, E.J. Manuel's just got to believe in him.
Yeah, and that's so all of the wide receivers,
whether it's with running routes or, if he switches his route up or he runs a different way, E.J. Manuel won't necessarily get the ball to him. He'll kind of overlook him. And for him to be a fantasy relevant, like we said, I think those two are going to have to get together. But they also got time in training camp and whatnot, so we'll see what comes to fruition with that.
And Emmanuel last year only had 11 touchdowns. He only played in 10 games. He came into the season, had knee surgery right before the season.
Yeah.
He only played 10 games. He had 11 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. You know, he threw 306 pass attempts, 1,972 yards. So obviously we expect to see progression with EJ Manuel. It's the second year in this offense, you know, so it's maybe something that you know they need to get acclimated to and a little bit more comfortable. I don't think EJ can finish inside the top 20 as far as quarterbacks in fantasy, but I think he does make some sort of a progression, and you know he's going to have to if Sammy Watkins is going to be that threat. You know, other interesting names, Mike Williams, who's this, I guess, not necessarily taking Stevie Johnson's spot, but maybe playing out of the slot. You know,
Well, they got Robert Woods playing in the slot.
oh, Woods is going to be.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was getting to. You know, they still have Robert Woods and Marquise Goodwin. You know, guys coming into their second year that, again, second year in that offense, and could potentially be, you know, a favorite target. And Marquise Goodwin, not Marquise Goodwin. What's the guy's name? Graham, Taj Graham, T.J. Graham.
TJ Graham.
Yeah, so he, you know,
They do have Marcus Goodwin as well.
another guy that could potentially be taking passes in that offense. You know, Scott Chandler, the tight end there.
Now with Mike Williams atop the depth chart, in the addition of Sammy Watkins, do you see Robert Woods getting more or less than 600 yards? Last season he had 600 yards, 3 touchdowns. Or he had 600 yards total. His receiving yards were 587. Do you see him breaking 600?
I think potentially he could, because I think he could be the guy who's not getting the coverage from defenses, right? So if
Yeah,
defenses
second year running
are,
back as well.
who's that?
Robert Woods.
Yeah, wide receiver, second year wide receiver.
Oh, what did I say, running back?
Yeah, you confused me there for a second. But
yeah, second year receiver.
right, and it's
We all know how
second year in
the
this.
second year receivers.
They, you know, typically tend to progress, and it's the second year in the same offense. And you know, if the defenses are going to be keying in on Sammy Watkins, and if you have a guy like Mike Williams that you know is somewhat of a known threat, it kind of leaves opportunities there.
Yeah.
So Robert Woods to me is a guy that you know I kind of like taking as a late round flyer. If you're in a shallow league, you know maybe you just keep an eye on him on the waiver wire. But you know he's not a guy that's gonna get to 1,000 yards, but I think he's an interesting option, especially in PPR if he can be like a possession receiver.
Yeah.
Where you know
he had 85 targets, 40 catches.
Yeah, so I think you know he probably stays around 80 targets. His receptions probably go up some. You know, probably closer to 60, 65 receptions. Typically, in your second year, you kind of make strides with your reception percentage.
And I do read here that going back to Watkins and his chemistry with E.J. Manuel, they're saying that Woods did have some chemistry with E.J. Manuel before Manuel got injured.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely one of those, you know, sneaky plays, or has the potential to be at least.
I would keep an eye out on him.
So moving on down to the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, I think that's enough said about the Bills.
Yeah. So
I was thinking about buying the Bills the other day, but then I said I forget it.
The defense?
No, buying the team.
Oh, yeah. So Miami Dolphins, we got a new offensive coordinator, Bill Lazor, you know, formerly from Philadelphia under the Chip Kelly offense.
Excited about Lazor.
Yeah, so this is something that, you know, potentially we can kind of mirror or make assumptions based off of what we saw in Philadelphia. And, you know, that's something where you see the receivers, you know, get up to speed before the line of scrimmage, and you see, you know, running backs get into space, and you know, it'll be interesting to see what Mike Wallace can do, what Brian Hartline can do, Ryan Tannehill, the new addition, Noshawn Moreno. So where do you want to start with this team?
For fantasy implications, I mean, the first person off the board, obviously, is going to be Mike Wallace. I mean, and we hear that they're going to start moving him around more and not just have him just be the deep threat, as of which he is.
Right, and I think that's...
So I like that, moving him around more. I think the next person off the board is Lamar Miller. I do like Lamar Miller ahead of Noshawn Moreno. The fact that he can, you know, break tackles and
get into space, really.
Exactly. Get into space and get going.
I believe Lamar Yeah, 4.5. Yeah, no, 4.0. I'm sorry, 4.0 yards per carry last year. Only had 2 touchdowns, but I mean that the offensive line was just atrocious, and
Yeah,
it's not necessarily an upgraded offensive line, but it's new additions to an offensive line, right? So
it's improved.
it's it's not worse than it was 1 year ago from today. So Moreno shows up out of shape, overweight.
Getting knee scope.
Now he's got arthroscopic knee surgery. So Lamar Miller,
He's been dominating
they've been saying it's his job to lose. So Miller may be someone. I always thought, as a Dolphins fan, I always thought Moreno was brought in for pass protection. Someone that could help Tannehill have a couple extra seconds. So I do agree with you. I like Lamar Miller a lot more than No Sean. Hartline's coming off his second 1,000-yard receiving year, which is kind of interesting to me because I just think Mike Wallace and Brian Hartline, if they're gonna kind of mimic that Chip Kelly offense, could it be Riley Cooper and Deshaun Jackson, where I think Hartline and Wallace are somewhat of an upgrade, maybe just barely, but somewhat of an upgrade from Deshaun and Riley Cooper. And
the only thing with Hartline is that his touchdown production's got to go up.
Yeah.
For him to be a viable option fantasy wise.
Yeah, that's the one thing that holds him back is the touchdowns. They still have Brandon Gibson, who should be healthy this year, who should be a go for hopefully for 16 games, who I really like a lot as a possession receiver.
I hate losing him towards the end of the season.
So I like Gibson in a late round deep PPR league. Nothing really more than that. Jarvis Landry, he still has to beat out Gibson and Rashard Matthews.
Now I don't know the numbers on. What do you got on the numbers for Hartline? How many touchdowns did he have?
Brian Hartline actually finished one spot below Mike Wallace.
Mike Wallace had what? 5 touchdowns?
Mike Wallace had 5 touchdowns. Brian Hartline had 4. Wallace on the season had 126.3 fantasy points, and Hartline had 125.6. So, like I said, and Hartline had over 1,000 yards, 1,016. Wallace had 930. So
my question to you, I got 2 questions for you that just popped in my head. Brandon Gibson, 3 touchdowns last year. You see him with more, or do you see him with less?
Gibson?
Brandon Gibson.
I think
with Wallace moving around, improved O-line. I mean, hopefully Tannehill's not on his back the majority of the game.
Right.
326 yards.
How many did he have?
326 yards, 3 touchdowns.
3 touchdowns. I would almost take the over on that. Let's see. Maybe it may be about the same. Maybe under 5. I'd say I'd take the under on 5 for Gibson. I think Tannehill threw 24 touchdowns last year. I think he could go up to that from that in his 3rd year. I think he could get to 30, especially if this offense is what we think it's going to be. So I'd give Gibson around 5. I'd definitely give Wallace more than 5. If they can get something going and exploit some mismatches. Excuse me. Hartline would probably lose out because he has the track record of not really being that end zone threat.
Now, my other question I had in mind, Charles Clay led the team with 7 total touchdowns.
Yeah, I like Clay a lot.
Does he repeat the team in leading touchdowns?
Yeah, I think he does because
over Wallace.
I like comparing Brent Selleck and Zach Ertz, the 2 tight ends from Philly last year. If you combine them, they make for the number 3 in fantasy, number 3 tight end in fantasy. So Clay had 102 targets last year, and he wasn't that involved in the offense towards the beginning of the year. So I think if they utilize him from the get-go, if they run a similar scheme where we saw Selleck and Ertz, be productive, Charles Clay has a chance to be a focal point of that offense, and everybody knows that Ryan Tannehill, his reads aren't the best. He checks down. he misses the running back a lot. There's a lot of times we sit here and watch games when we're yelling at him to dump it off to Lamar Miller or what have you. But I think Charles Clay can be that kind of safety valve over the top where he can be productive, especially in this offense. So to answer your question, long story short, yeah, I think his touchdowns are closer to 10.
He'll lead the team in touchdowns.
I don't know that he necessarily lead the team. It all depends on Mike Wallace, right?
Yeah.
For me at least, I think
and the improvement of Tannehill, of course.
Right. Because if Tannehill can get more than 24 touchdowns, because the year before he had, 12 touchdowns in 2012, I think? He had 12 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, or something like that.
Yeah, I believe so.
So I think if Wallace, I'd give Wallace probably 6 or 7, probably 7. Hartline.
No, he had 24 touchdowns, 17 interceptions.
For 2012, though.
Oh, 2012?
Yeah.
He had 12 passes, 13 interceptions.
Right. So that's what I mean. He doubled his touchdowns. So if he can go up to 30, which isn't that far of a stretch,
6 more.
So I think it's possible. I'm not sure that he necessarily leads the team. I think he's the second option if it's not Mike Wallace.
Yeah.
If it's not Mike Wallace leading the team, I think it's going to be Charles Clay.
All right, Bill Lazor, let's see what you can do.
Yeah, really. Well, I'm putting a lot of faith in Bill Lazor just to see if it can, kind of mimic the offense that we saw in Philadelphia. So let's move on up to New England, the New England Patriots. And first guy that comes to your mind, I think everyone is thinking Rob Gronkowski.
Yep.
So Gronk, if he could play 16 games, Tom Brady's stats go up when Gronk's on the field. Obviously, Gronk's stats go up on the field. It kind of opens things up for everybody else.
Yeah.
Except for Julian Edelman, he gets less targets, less yards when Gronk's on the field and when he's healthy. But I think that's more of taken away from Edelman's game and maybe Amendola's game than necessarily Aaron Dobson or Kenbrell Tompkins. You got Stephen Ridley in the backfield who is coming off the boards, and I don't have the ADP in front of me, but I think around 6th, 7th round for Stephen Ridley.
Oh yeah.
So and that's somebody who we've seen finish it, near a top 10 running back before he had fumbling problems. If he can, hold on to the ball, LeGarrette Blount is no longer a threat there. It's a contract year for Ridley. Belichick doesn't typically like to pay running backs, but he still has something to prove to try and get some sort of money.
Exactly.
So I mean, and Shane Vereen behind him. Shane Vereen is a PPR monster when he's healthy. He had, I think it was 9.9. I was working on something earlier for the Patriots, and it was Vereen had let me see. Vereen had 9.9 yards per catch. Let me see. Yeah, I go off of everything's written down for me, so I don't. It takes me a little bit longer to find than just googling it. 4.7 yards per rush, and 9.0 yards per catch for Shane Vereen.
8 games in.
Yeah, and that was only exactly 8 games. So a full 16-game season, and Vereen is coming off the board, or in about the 3rd round. With the likes of Reggie Bush, C.J. Spiller, Andre Ellington. So I don't think that Ridley and Vereen necessarily take each other's production away. I think they can both be productive for you as fantasy starters. I think if Vereen can hold on to the ball, there's no question in my mind that he reverts back to a top 15 rusher.
Yeah, he'll remain up top. Top of the depth chart.
So Kenbrell Tompkins and Aaron Dobson, these are guys that they're going late. They're not really sure. You can't really be sure with Belichick and how he utilizes, the wide receivers there. If Brady has a connection with them, they go to that guy. If they start having drops, they go away from him.
Yeah, I mean, you remember last season, you see wide open passes for Dobson and Kenbrell Tompkins, and these guys are just dropping the ball left and right, and you kind of see the frustration in Brady because he's getting it right to him, and they're not holding on to the ball. So I think if both these guys fix their ball handling skills, I think he'll be in a lot better position.
Yeah, and so if
Especially with Julian Edelman and Amendola
right,
being injury prone and
that's exactly where I was going with that.
Gronkowski injury prone.
If Edelman saw 151 targets last year, if Edelman stays on the field, if Amendola stays on the field, if Gronkowski stays on the field, Dobson and Tompkins, it's going to be really hard to be able to start one and trust one each week. It's going to be spread around a lot. So I think the only guy as of now is Gronk.
Yeah.
Edelman is going. Again, I don't have the ADP in front of me. I'm going off of memory on MFL, but Edelman's going around round 5, I believe. And it's just
that sounds about right.
I just don't think the 151 targets is sustainable for Edelman.
No, not this season.
And plus, Brandon LaFell, who they said originally they were going to line up in the old Hernandez blocking scheme because he's an excellent blocker. So it's really hard to tell with this offense. And Brady going in the 10th round, Gronk's going in the 3rd round. Those are really your only two viable options that you can really trust consistently week to week.
Yep.
So, anything else on New England?
Yeah, don't win the division.
Yeah, don't win the division.
That's it.
So, over to the New York Jets, and now this is a team that kind of got a makeover this year, right? So, who jumps out to you? Like, who from the Jets? Not necessarily what you aim for, but who do you feel comfortable with on your fantasy team? Potential starter in a shallow league.
Right off the bat, Chris Johnson.
Chris Johnson?
In this division, yeah.
So Chris Johnson, yards per carry have gone down each of the last 3 years.
Yeah.
But there's something to be said about the Jets being, that kind of run first, smash mouth offense where, Geno Smith, Michael Vick, Chris Johnson, Chris Ivory, that's a pretty good set of legs you got there.
Yeah, and you hear them talking about doing a running back committee over there, not saying that, not necessarily Chris Johnson getting all the carries and being the workhorse. And you know how the Jets are; they always play the hot hand in the running backs. So whoever's hot at the moment, that's who they're going to be putting on the field.
Yeah,
but I think Chris Johnson over Chris Ivory. I'm not sure their ADPs at the moment, but I mean I don't see Chris Ivory going early in the draft. And neither Chris Johnson, but you see Chris Johnson go well before Chris Ivory.
Yeah, and I think there's something, like I said, his yards per carry have gone down each year, and I think last year was 3.9. But there's something to be said for opportunity, right? So if they're going to keep giving him the ball, and that's the other thing about Chris Johnson is, he may not give you these spectacular weeks, but at the end of the season, he finishes in the top 20, top 10, top 15 because he plays all 16 games and because he's durable and because he can finish out the season and altogether, cumulatively, he looks good at the end of the year.
Just let him break out.
But he is coming off of he did have knee surgery already this offseason.
Yeah.
I think it was just torn meniscus or something, which is not major, but it's still something that you don't want to rely on the running back for when he's coming off knee problem. And it was actually 3.8 yards per carry last year. But he's also said that he wants to kind of prove to Tennessee that he still has it. And actually too, before we move off Chris Johnson, he's coming off a career high in receptions, I believe, of 42. I think that was his career high. So I mean, potentially he could be involved in the passing game as well.
Yeah.
And it's a similar.
Well, he had a few more seasons with his first few seasons. He had scattered with 43, 50, 44
reception.
Oh, there's a 57 in there.
Okay.
2011 was his top 57.
Okay, I thought that was career high was 42. Maybe how many touchdowns did he have receiving? Maybe I mixed that stat up.
Yeah, that's what it is. His career high receiving 4 touchdowns.
Right. So, well, I mean, my point in all that was just that he is competent. and catching the ball and being utilized in passing plays.
Who else sticks out to you from the New York Giants? I'm sorry, I said Giants. I meant the Jets.
Yeah, I think Eric Decker, is a name that is going to be drafted.
Just from his last year's production, but
Right.
he's not going to get the same kind of production. You're not going to go from Peyton Manning to Geno Smith or Vic and get the same kind of production there.
Yeah, I don't buy it with Eric Decker. If you look at his stats from the past couple of years, he just had 1,000-yard seasons, but he also had the targets to back it up. So he had over 100 targets, 136 targets last year, and 87 catches this year, and I believe it was around 80 2012 where he had the 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
So 85, yeah. So my point being is he's going to need 80 catches to get you 1,000 yards, right? So is he going to get 80 catches from Geno Smith? Jeremy Curley had 46 last year, and he was the leading receiver on the team.
Doesn't seem likely.
I just don't buy it. As far as defense coverages too, Decker is going to be the guy that they kind of keep an eye on. Stephen Hill, there's really Jeremy Curley's there, David Nelson's there. There's really not too much, and I think this offense is, I've said before that they're kind of desperate for positive yardage, right? So Jeff Cumberland at tight end or Jason Morrow, somebody is going to emerge and be, the top target. But
yeah, we're talking starters. Are you going Mike Williams or are you going with Eric Decker?
I'd probably go Decker over Mike Williams.
Yeah,
just because of volume. And I think Decker may become more of that go-to guy.
Exactly.
But I mean, Mike Williams is not necessarily on my radar at all. Not that Decker is, but he's
I just saw
least
the two starters here, and I said let's pick between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would go with Eric Decker, of course, over Mike Williams.
Yeah, and so Jeff Cumberland and Jason Morrow, that's a training camp battle for tight end that's going to have to come to terms. Geno Smith and Michael Vick, it'll be interesting to see what happens if Geno Smith, can be that mobile quarterback. Because I think Geno Smith wins the job.
Yeah, of course. I agree with you there.
And if he doesn't win it, Vick will get injured and give it back.
Yeah, but then you look and you see 12 touchdowns and 21 interceptions is kind of
Geno?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
5 fumbles.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Barely broke 2,000 yards.
So, maybe it's a situation where Geno's on somewhat of a
6
short
rushing
leash.
touchdowns.
Yeah, I think if
I mean Michael Vick being a mentor in the rushing game.
That's the thing, right?
Help him.
Is Vic there to mentor him, or is Vic there to quote unquote fight for the starting job?
Yeah,
I think it's more of a mentor situation.
Probably.
They know Smith has got to be their franchise quarterback.
And push him to step up and grab the reins.
Yeah, I don't. The Michael Vick signing to me just screams,
help.
No, not necessarily help, but I mean that's what people interpret it as.
Yeah, of course.
But I think it's more of like an apprenticeship, or he wants to mold him and kind of groom him rather than just completely give up. I mean Rex Ryan, how many 500 seasons does Rex Ryan have left in his career?
I don't remember the answer.
They're gonna have to do something to ensure a winning season and positive progression. But that has nothing to do with fantasy, so let's jump back into fantasy and move over to Denver.
Yeah,
Denver Broncos.
The East.
So for Denver, I mean, just talking about Eric Decker. Eric Decker left. Now he's in New York, so it leaves things a little open, not necessarily uncertain, but leaves things open over in Denver with Demaryius Thomas, Wes Welker, Emmanuel Sanders.
And just a side note, the AFC East and the AFC West play each other this season.
Yeah.
This year.
Yeah, so Demaryius Thomas, I think you you and I both have the same notion where Calvin Johnson doesn't necessarily have to be the number one wide receiver.
No.
Demaryius Thomas could easily be the number one there.
Exactly. I mean, especially if, God forbid, you have Welker go down.
Yeah, it's just
We're
one
not sure what
concussion.
Emmanuel Sanders is going to bring to the table. Of course, you have Julius Thomas that's going to get ample amount of receptions. So obviously, Demaryius Thomas is your top guy to go to. And if Welker goes down, God forbid, he's one concussion away from being sidelined. You see his ceiling just rise if that's the given situation.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing too about Welker. If he really is one concussion away. I mean, you say that about Michael Finley too, who's trying to come back into the league.
Yeah.
But Welker is he's not necessarily a risk. He over his span of his career, he really hasn't missed that many games, but he does have these little injuries, and these concussions last year were a big one. So Cody Latimer, is a guy that could potentially step into that role that Wes Welker had, and this is a contract year for Welker as well. So Latimer is a guy that I like, late in drafts, where he could potentially just jump right into that role.
Now with Moreno being gone, you got Monte Ball here. Moreno had last year 74 targets, and Monte Ball had just 27. Obviously, we're going to see his numbers go up in targets. He only had 20 catches. Now Moreno, what do you think him as a passing back? Do you think as a receiving back? Do you think he'll step up into a role like that, or do you think that was just something Moreno had in his pocket?
I think if you're going to be on the field with Peyton Manning,
in the past, Moreno didn't really have exquisite targets. I mean, he never broke more than 50 before last season.
Yeah, I think if you're going to be on the field with Peyton Manning, you're going to be expected to do stuff like that, pass protection, pass catching. Monte Ball, this is a guy last year who we thought was given the starting position, and Noshawn came out of nowhere and kind of surprised a lot of people. Monte Ball right now is first, second round running back. His first round.
I mean, he's improved his footwork, and then he's getting better positioning during pass protection.
There's Noshawn 80. I think it was 81. It's definitely 80. Maybe 81% of Noshawn's carries came with 6 or less defenders in the box.
Yeah.
So if Monte Ball is the starter, which we're all assuming that he is, there's no reason why he can't just pick up where Noshawn left off. And Noshawn finishes the top 5 back, and that's where Ball is being taken right now. Not necessarily the first round because we mix in some wide receivers and Jimmy Graham, but Ball is coming off the boards in that second round where he's a top 10 running back.
Yeah, I mean he's
then you have to rank him there.
Yeah,
you have to assume until we know otherwise, just because of the potential that offense allows you.
Exactly. I mean, everybody's going to be focused on Demaryius Thomas and Julius Thomas, and you see him just jump out for a little pitch or a little screen pass, and boom.
Now, what do you think about Julius Thomas? Because Thomas is coming off the board right now, so it's Graham, Gronk, and Thomas.
Gronk, and Tom.
It was Thomas before Gronk, and now that Gronk is saying he's going to be healthy, he wants
ready for week 1.
Right. So now you see Gronk coming back up into
him, of course,
tight end 1 or tight end 2. But what do you think?
Julius Thomas. I mean, I've read nothing but good. They want to be more creative with him. Of course, he was very involved the last season. I mean, he missing 2 games, and he, still had 12 touchdowns. He only had 788 yards. You give him the over or under on that? I definitely give him
the over,
closer to 1,000.
Yeah, I do too.
And that was with missing 2 games. So if he had those 2 games,
what do you give him? Well, here's the thing: the overall tight ends from the Denver Broncos had a cumulative 1,064 yards. 788 of that went to Julius Thomas.
Yeah, and that's with Joel Dressen and Jacob Tannen.
Right. So, 12 yards after a catch, 12 touchdowns. The team tight end came 14 touchdowns. He had 12. So he's obviously the tight end there.
Yeah.
Like you said, he missed 2 games. If he plays all 16 games and starts off as the focal point in the offense for all 16 games, starting at game 1. I guess what I'm getting at is, if you take Thomas in the 3rd round, where does he finish in overall? Does he finish like Graham finished as a top 26 overall last year? Does he finish as a top 26 overall? Does he finish as a top 30 overall? Top 35 overall?
For tight end?
For fantasy, all position-wise.
Hmm.
So Graham had 217 points last season, and that was the 26th best position of all positions, right? So counting quarterback, running back. I don't have the stats in front of me. I had it up earlier. We were talking about
top 35, top 40.
Yeah.
I think he breaks top 40.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I mean, seeing as how we read that he's going to be used more creatively in the passing game, and even he himself even admitted that he was very unsure of himself last season in the offense, and that now he's just really starting to pick things up. So for a guy like that to be unsure of the offense and to not, exactly be on board with Peyton Manning on all plays and know where he needs to be, for him to still have a season like that, I think his ceiling only rises as well.
Real quick before we move on, because we do have to move on for time constraints, but last year Eric Decker, 11 touchdowns. What do you think Emmanuel Sanders is? 10 touchdowns, over under?
How many games did Wes Welker play last season?
Welker?
Yeah.
Wes Welker played 13 games and had 10 touchdowns.
10. Welker healthy. Demarius healthy. Julius Thomas healthy. Emmanuel Sanders, 8 touchdowns.
Yeah, I'd probably give a safe bet of 8 as well.
Just under 10.
Yeah, I have
shy of 10. I'll give him upside because he's a burner. He gets the ball, he's gonna burn you.
I have Emmanuel Sanders 4 spots under Wes Welker. I have Welker at 19, and I have Emmanuel Sanders at 23. I think I wouldn't be shocked if he finished 4 spots ahead of Wes Welker.
It was only him and, for the most part, and Antonio Brown last season.
Well, Jared McCautry
too.
10 touchdowns though.
Well, last season, Emmanuel Sanders only had 6 touchdowns.
Yeah.
For Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Of course, you're going from Roethlisberger.
Cautry had 10, so that's one of those things that's kind of.
You're going from Roethlisberger to Peyton, but you also have a lot more weapons in Denver than you did in Pittsburgh.
So real quickly,
so it kind of balances out. I'd say 2 more than last year, but 2 less than 10. So right at 8.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think it just depends on how close Peyton can replicate this past season.
And of course, without saying, if Welker goes down, God forbid, nobody wants to see that. But if he goes down, of course, I throw 4 more touchdowns in there. Then he'll get just 2 above 10. So he's in the 8 to 12, I would say.
Yeah.
Depending on Welker and depending on how he fits into the offense.
So would you rather take Emmanuel Sanders or Mike Wallace?
I take Mike Wallace.
Mike Wallace?
Yeah, he's the guy over there. Number 1. The season he had last year was awful. So I think he's not going to want to have that. And of course, for him saying that Mike Wallace, not to get back to the AFC East, but him saying he wants to return kicks. Yeah. He may want to return kicks this season. So I think his involvement and his motivation to really be a playmaker on that team is a lot more this season. So yeah, I'll go with Wallace.
All right, so moving on to the Kansas City Chiefs, Jamal Charles. Moving on to the Oakland Raiders. No, I'm just joking.
That's all that needs to be said, huh?
Yeah, basically, right? So Jamal Charles led the team in rushing. You kind of gave me a look like, what? Jamal Charles led the team in rushing.
You don't want to talk about Donnie Avery?
Led the team in receptions. Dwayne Bowe, it's kind of apparent that he's somewhat missed a step or two. Um, don't know that he actually gets back to the Dwayne Bowe of old. Donnie Avery, we kind of joke about it, but potentially somebody to keep an eye on. I'm not drafting him. Um, I don't even have him ranked, but maybe somebody to keep an eye on waivers just to see what that offense looks like. The offensive line will be a little bit of a downgrade from last season. With Alex Smith being that check down quarterback, I'd actually like to see um, Smith's stats on deep balls last year, just under that Andy Reid offense. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't really see anybody else on the team. Anthony Fasano, um, you know, he just I think he had three touchdowns in the last 4 games.
Who's that?
Anthony Fasano.
Oh yeah, he Let me just check. I'll tell you right here. 3 touchdowns.
3 touchdowns. Yeah, and
9 games, 33 targets, 23 catch, 200 yards.
so I'm looking at Smith's game log last year. I'm looking at his long, right? So the long pass. 26, 31, 51, 34, 44, 24, 43, 28, 20, 26, 36, 28, 22. 1 for 71 against the Oakland Raiders, and then 19 to finish off the season. So I just
How did Kevin excuse me? How did Alex Smith finish last year, fantasy wise? He's top 10, right?
I don't believe top 10. He had a couple 20-point games in there.
Top 15 maybe.
16.
Ooh, 16, huh?
So he finished with 306 fantasy points. Compare that to Peyton Manning with 496. So that's just kind of the difference there. A lot of the guys in the top 4 to 12 or so, it's really not that big of a difference.
Yeah.
But so yeah, Alex Smith, he played 15 games, 509 pass attempts. I'm trying to think who we compare that to. Compare that to Andrew Luck with 572 pass attempts. 60% completion, 3,313 yards. There was 9 guys who threw for 4,000. I think Ryan Tannehill was 83 yards shy of 4,000. 23 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. The thing about Smith is his rushing yards. He had 432 rushing yards, which is up there. It's right under, the Newton and Kaepernick and Russell Wilson. But and 1 rushing touchdown.
Now, 2014 season, Alex Smith, does he break top 10 quarterback wise?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Alex Smith, I'm not even sure.
I don't think so at all. I mean, especially given the fact that, the draft comes around and Kansas City doesn't even draft a receiver. They didn't try to help him offensively any way possible. You got 2 receivers last season that didn't break 1,000 yards, and here you are sitting in the draft and you let every receiver go by.
Yeah, and your offensive line is a downgrade. Your defense is a downgrade.
They lost. Did they lose Justin Houston? Or
I'm not sure.
I want to say that they did.
Real quick, while you look that up, Alex Smith for me is at 22, quarterback overall, just under Joe Flacco and just above Sam Bradford. So that's kind of where I see Alex Smith. I mean, if you're doing if you're waiting on quarterbacks in your draft and you wait and wait and wait and you take Alex Smith, as your first quarterback, I have no problem with that whatsoever.
Yeah, I scratched that. I was thinking of somebody else. They still have Justin Houston over there. All right, linebacker anyway.
I was So what I was saying is I have no problem with that strategy, even though I have him ranked 22nd. I have no problem with you waiting and taking Alex Smith as your first quarterback because he's going to give you some 20-point games, and especially when he can run a little bit. He's not a mobile quarterback, but he can scramble.
Yeah.
And we
When he needs
see
to.
Andy Reid, have success with quarterbacks. It's just somewhat of the uncertainty. And I mean, obviously, he's not a sexy play guy or a guy that pass the eye test with. But who would you rather have, Alex Smith or Ryan Tannehill?
It's a good one. I mean, you got Tannehill, slightly improved offensive line. You got a new offensive coordinator. You got Alex Smith. No new receivers. His receivers didn't break 1,000 yards last season, both of them, and Avery and Bo. Alex Smith is the final contract year. I would go Tannehill.
I have Tannehill as well.
Yeah,
I would
Tannehill.
go. To me, it's more
Just to compare and
upside.
contrast the two. Yeah, Tannehill's got the upside there. Receiver wise, upside.
But I have Tannehill 19 and Alex Smith 22, so it's not a huge difference. It's the upside there.
Yeah, Tannehill starts using his legs more, which I've seen plenty of opportunities he was given when he gets scrambled, but he just cowered behind the O-line trying to make a play happen.
Yeah, the Dolphins have added, whereas Kansas City
Tannehill
has
uses his
subtracted.
legs more. He's definitely a lot better pick to me than Alex Smith.
So let's move on to the Oakland Raiders. The Oakland Raiders are another team much like the Jets, where it's
the Raiders
offensive makeover.
Like Chris Berman would say, the Raiders.
The Raiders. I don't know. What do we got? We got a lot of mediocrity.
Quarterback over there, Matt Schaub. Well, first off, who right off the list? Fantasy implications. Does anybody jump off the list at you?
For me,
you got this running back tandem.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I don't know what's most appealing to me in Oakland. I like Streeter.
I do like Streeter.
I like Streeter. That's what I was trying to find him in my rankings. He's entering his third year. I just think they're going to need somebody over there. He knows the offense somewhat.
Well, MJD is the first to come off the board.
Yeah, absolutely. So MJD, Darren McFadden. I don't think they'll necessarily be used in the same capacity. They're not like a true handcuff to each other, I don't believe. I could see McFadden being utilized more in passing downs and Jones-Drew kind of doing cleanup there. Latavius Murray, I think for sure if you're drafting Jones-Drew or McFadden, which I'm not opposed to drafting McFadden in the 10th round, but I think for sure you should take a look at Latavius Murray as a handcuff. I think Murray is the handcuff to
both of them, they both have, RB3.
Yeah, they're basically flex
like
plays.
A flex option, of course, yeah.
James Jones on the outside.
They said they're going to run the ball.
Yeah.
Running it.
Well, if you look at, Matt Schaub, his success success, quote unquote, in Houston, where he targeted Andre Johnson a ton and had that running back where he could depend on. And Arian Foster.
I mean, you see MJD saying, he contemplated retirement.
Yeah, you never want to see that.
He had it, and he gets back with his trainer, and now all of a sudden he's back in it, and he's.
Yeah, he can completely turn it around, or he can completely lose motivation. I mean, I don't know. You don't necessarily want to see that with the guy you're paying to lead your offense.
Yeah.
James Jones on the outside, the former Packers touchdown machine.
Yeah. To go back to running backs, I think it does help McFadden in a sense that he's never had a 16-game season.
Right.
And, if there's a specific game they want to gear McFadden towards, they can keep him healthy for that game.
Right.
Or any specific situation where they know McFadden's going to be a better option than MJD. MJD will be there to keep him healthy for the most part. And
I agree. I think
they could utilize him in a better sense.
Yeah, I hope for that.
McFadden. They'll have MJD that takes carries there and not
you can kind of cater to McFadden's skill set more.
Yeah.
than just feeding him the ball.
Yeah, MJG broke 1,000 yards last season. That's given with 314 catch yards. Does he break 1,000 rush yards?
Jones Drew or DMC?
Oh yeah, Jones Drew. I mean, you gotta remember that he was the workhorse in
No,
Jacksonville.
no, I don't think he does.
Does he break 500?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think he breaks 500. I think he's around 600, 700.
Yeah.
Like you said though, it's kind of we hope that that's the case where MJD is the workhorse and McFadden is the specialty or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
So that way you can get the maximum out of both of them. But we're not really sure so far. It's still early, so it's one of those things that you just got to keep an eye on. Jones Drew, just to give you an idea, 33rd in my rankings. So I like 32 other running backs more than Jones Drew and one non-starting running back. And that's probably Ridley and Vereen.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's basically last, and he's just underneath Ben Page. So that's how I feel about him. I don't know. I just don't see the upside there right now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think in any of my NFLs I've touched McFadden or MJD.
I've taken McFadden.
I've seen him there, and I've just found I've convinced myself other options are better.
Yeah.
In a sense, it's like you see MJD, and then you'll see someone else, and you're like, well, you make a case for the other person.
Right.
In a sense, I don't know if that's just me, but I kind of steer clear of the whole.
Yeah, I have a problem. It's like, oh, and Darren McFadden in the first round? Yeah, I'll take him. Oh, Darren McFadden in the third round? Yeah, I'll take him. Oh, Darren McFadden in the fifth round? All right, I'll take him. Oh, Darren McFadden in the 10th round? Yeah, I mean, I can't not take him. I've kind of gotten into that Darren McFadden sympathizer or something. I'm not sure. It's always, to me, it's, oh, well, he's gonna break one eventually, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't have him ranked that way, but I tend to get caught up sometimes. So James Jones on the outside, we got James Jones, Denarius Moore, Rod Streeter, Andre Holmes. Andre Holmes is said to be impressing people so far. Rod Streeter I really like a lot. We alluded to it earlier. He's entering his third year with this offense as well. Holmes is entering his second year with the offense, but third year in the league as well. Denarius Moore is a guy who shows you flashes, but he just really can't stay on the field.
Yeah.
James Jones, he was a huge possession receiver in Green Bay when they needed him. When Jordy Nelson went down or Randall
Yeah, man.
Cobb.
I know Holmes. He passed Denarius Moore as the team's number 3 receiver.
Did he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with Denarius Moore. It's you got to stay on the field in order to gain a trust, and I just don't think Moore has done that or can prove that he can do that. So it's interesting to me. I was asking people on Twitter today. If you had to buy one Oakland receiver, would it be Jones, Moore, Holmes, or Streeter? And I got a couple Streeters and I got a couple Jones. And it was basically split down the middle. And I think that's how the majority of the people feel. I like Streeter as later option. I'll take Streeter. I'll let Jones pass and I'll take Streeter. Take Holmes late, but these are guys. This is an offense where it's going to be another wait and see type of offense.
Yeah.
James Jones, and that's the other thing too. If Matt Schaub can connect with one of these guys, with a veteran guy like James Jones, not comparing him to Andre Johnson, but the situation where Schaub is just going to keep throwing and throwing and throwing and throwing to the same guy.
Yeah, I mean, but last year James Jones had Aaron Rodgers. He didn't break 1,000 yards. I mean, he had other receivers over there.
Right.
He didn't break 1,000 yards, and last year Rod Streeter had Terrell Pryor, and he also did not break 1,000 yards. Are there any Oakland receivers this season, to break 1,000 yards with Matt Schaub? Or if Matt Schaub,
Or Derek Carr
forgets what jersey color he's going to, does Derek Carr take one of these receivers to 1,000 yards? Question is, are any of these receivers breaking 1,000 yards? We know it's not the tight ends.
I would say out of them, for me, it would be Rod Streeter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen if James Jones couldn't break 1,000 yards with Rodgers, and I mean that's a little unfair because he wasn't the number one, number two receiver over there. But I, I don't know. I mean, if he has 64 receptions for 784 yards, I mean, I guess that's not that bad. But I don't know. I'd pick the upside with Streeter. The more unknown than go with the guy who has a track record of not doing it.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that James Jones won't be an option there. I just don't see him as a starter. I think both guys are flex options.
Yeah.
At best right now. And if you're picking
he's a solid number two on the team, but
in fantasy, I mean,
fantasy wise, it's
wide receiver 3 right now at best, and I think you're splitting hairs until we know more.
That's why everybody's waiting on training camp.
Yep, and we're pretty close to training camp starting. For
Buffalo Bills already started.
Yep. So San Diego, let's round this AFC West out with San Diego. Phillip Rivers had somewhat of a resurgent year last year. Completed 69.54% of his passes. I was doing something earlier for the fantasy draft guide. I was working on this, and this kind of shocked me. 69% completion. That's better than Drew Brees. It's better than Peyton Manning. 69% is not something to scoff at. 4,478 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions.
Yeah, the third most passing yards and second most passing touchdowns of his career.
Yeah, so he had kind of a rejuvenation.
Found life.
Yeah, under Ken Wisenhunt, but Ken Wisenhunt is gone now, down in Tennessee. I think it's the tight end coach, the former tight end coach, is the new offensive coordinator.
I don't know. I know their new coach is Mike McCoy.
So, I mean, I think the new offensive coordinator is either the tight end coach from last year or he was involved in the offense last year. So it doesn't mean that the offense will necessarily change too much from what Wisenhunt was doing. But I think Rivers, typically he's been wildly inconsistent throughout his career, so I think he kind of reverts back to that.
Who's the quarterback coach?
Who's the quarterback coach? Okay, so he's
the new offense coordinator.
That makes you feel a little bit better knowing that offense is going to stay the same, or at least stay very similar.
I mean, he was named comeback player of the year.
Yeah, I just think he takes a little bit of a step backwards and kind of reverts back to his old ways.
Yeah. I mean, you see, almost every season he's got more than. It's just the interceptions.
But so Keenan Allen is the guy coming off the board first.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's the first one off the board we see.
Yeah, he's rookie breaking 1,000 yards. Obviously, that's gonna be
under the radar.
Yeah,
everybody had all these other names that we were looking at last year.
Yep.
Rookie receivers, and here comes Keenan Allen.
Yep. Eddie Royal, right? It was the first couple weeks. He was like a huge touchdown.
Yeah.
Touchdown guy at the beginning of the season. Everyone picked him up on waiver wires. They still got Michael Floyd, can't stay healthy. They still got Vincent Jackson, Eddie Royal, Ryan Matthews. Well, before we get into the running backs,
Vincent Brown.
Yeah. What do you think for Keenan Allen? I have a hard time. I mean, let's see. Let me get my wide receiver paper here. Keenan Allen. He had 104 targets. That's 15 games he played, at 104 targets. If he plays 16 games, and he starts off as the focal point of that offense from game one, what do you think he ends up around in target wise? You think he's 120, 130?
How many did he have last season?
He had 104.
104? Yeah, that sounds about right. 120.
So that puts him, up there with guys like, Deshaun Jackson. 130 would be around Eric Deckers, Jordy Nelson. So, I mean, that's where you got to draft him in that elite second tier wide receivers.
I mean, I don't think he takes a step back at all.
No, I think I think his targets go up. I think maybe his touchdowns may go down a little bit. He had 8. I don't think he can necessarily get 8 again, but I think if his targets go up, he has the opportunity to not
Yeah.
only
I
increase
mean, he
his
just broke
touchdowns, but
1,000 yards.
yeah, that's the thing too, right? He barely broke it.
1,046.
But so if his targets go up, if he stays the focal
Exactly.
point, then he should be a lock for over 1,000. Antonio Gates to me is a guy, you know, he had a pretty good statistical year last year, and right now everyone seems to be drafting Ladarius Green a couple rounds ahead of Antonio Gates.
Yeah.
And I'm at the point where I like to go off sample size, and Green had a couple big games, not necessarily big games. He had big plays during a couple games at the end of the season last year. So I'm not really buying in too much on there. Ryan Matthews finally played 16 games last year, but it was limited down the stretch. Um, he's in that bottom tier right now of running backs, where it's Ryan Matthews, Trent Richardson, Chris Johnson, somewhere around there, where it's third, fourth round material. They went out and got Donald Brown. I don't know what you're looking at. I know your depth chart is updated. Does it have Brown or Woodhead?
It's got Matthews, Woodhead, Brown.
Matthews, Woodhead, Brown. What I'm looking at is Matthews, Brown, Woodhead.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, these things, it's so early that
Yeah, we're not going to know.
So we don't
exactly for training camp.
You can't buy into it too much. But my point being is, I think Woodhead takes that third spot. I think he takes a step back where it's Donald Brown becomes the handcuff to Ryan Matthews, but Danny Woodhead is kind of that standalone value.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like guys like Shane Vereen, who's not necessarily a handcuff. He's a standalone value. So I think it's kind of where Danny Woodhead falls this year. I don't think he has a year that he did last year. But
no, I mean, well, you see Woodhead having 87 targets, 76 catches, and you see Matthews with 33 targets, 26 catches.
Yeah.
I mean, so Danny Woodhead is utilized in the passing game a lot more. And I think that gives him an upside, especially with PPR.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
I think he stays on the field in passing situations.
Yeah.
But I think that may be about it.
I mean, he had 106 carries, as Ryan Matthews had 285. So they're kind of, you got one taking the carries, and you got the other one taking the catches. So, like you said, the standalone value, I think, is a good point.
Yeah, and I think Donald Brown, I think what he had 200. Excuse me, what did he have? 282 carries, Brian Matthews.
Matthews 285.
285. Yeah, and I think he's around there, 250 to 280. And I like, Donald Brown is a guy that they had to have. They went out and bought him. 5.2 yards per carry last year in Indianapolis.
No, I got
7.9 yards per catch.
Yeah, so, I got Matthews at 7 touchdowns and Woodhead at 8 touchdowns. Do you think Woodhead has more touchdowns this season than Matthews?
No.
No?
I as of right now, I think Woodhead is taking a step back, and Donald Brown.
I mean, he's got six catching touchdowns as opposed to Matthews' 1 catching touchdown.
Yeah, I think Matthews stays around the same. If he can play 16 games again.
Yeah.
Which I'm not sold that he will, but if he plays 16 games again, I think he stays at where he's at. I don't think last year was necessarily his ceiling, but I think it would be hard for him to top last year. I think Woodhead takes a step back a little bit. That offense changes just a little bit, not a lot. And then I think Donald Brown is the complementary back. They've said Ryan Matthews is their guy, but I think Donald Brown is going to challenge that. Not challenge it for the starting position, but just if Donald Brown is on the field getting 5.2 yards per carry and 7.9 yards per catch, he's not coming off the field. Especially if they want to conserve Ryan Matthews.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Obviously I'm not sure because we have to wait and see how it plays out. But as of now, my off-season perspective, that's just what I see. Anything else you want to touch on before we get out of here?
Yeah, one last thing. The AFC East. Who's taking it?
Miami Dolphins. No, probably Patriots.
Patriots?
Yeah, probably by a large margin.
Okay.
If everyone can stay healthy on the team, I think it's not even fair.
Yeah. And who finishes the season in last for the AFC East? The Jets or
I
is
hope
it
it's
the
the
Bills?
Jets. I hope it's the Jets. I'm gonna say the Jets because I really like what the Bills have done, and I really
You
like
notice
the.
how I asked is it the Jets or the
Yeah.
Bills? 'Cause me as a Dolphin fan, I want to say above 500, and I truthfully believe they'll be above 500. 8-8 last season, right along with the Jets. Jets beat us
Yeah, but
last
the
game.
Jets
Just
backed into 8-8,
yeah, exactly.
and
So
we backed out of over 500.
one more for the AFC East. What do you think the Dolphins regular season standings are?
10-6.
10-6.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I'm doing the Fantasy Riot draft guide right now, and as a Dolphins fan, like you said, not to reiterate, but as a Dolphins fan, we get the schedules, and I'm sitting here looking at the schedule, just shaking my head, putting my palm in my head, just like,
Yeah.
oh, great, man.
We finally get a home game to start the season against Patriots.
Yeah, but as I'm doing this draft guide and I'm doing strength of schedule, ease of schedule, it actually looks pretty good for the Dolphins. And it goes off of it changes so much drastically year to year, but
Well, like we said, they also got to play the Broncos, the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Raiders,
right.
playing the AFC East. West, excuse me.
So I say 10-6 only because that offense. If
And
that
we got to
offense
play the Patriots twice.
can be what I hope it can be, that high octane,
Yeah.
fast paced offense, then 10-6.
And for the AFC West, the Raiders going to take it?
Hey, Raiders and the Chiefs, right? No, the Broncos take it.
The Broncos.
Last place.
Of course, you see regression with Peyton Manning.
Yeah,
I don't think much.
Regression for Peyton Manning is like.
Yeah, I think I read he throws 15 less touchdowns than last season. He's still
still number one in touchdowns. Yeah, I think.
So Broncos to take the AFC West, and who's going to wrap up the?
Yeah, Drew Brees had 39 last year, so 15 less is 40. Still
exactly. So who wraps it up? The Raiders, 4-12 last season.
Yeah, I'm going to say Kansas City.
Kansas City, they were 11-5 last season.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to say Kansas City.
Even with Jamal?
First to worst.
Even with Jamal?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I'm going to go out on a limb. I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for it, but.
And you said the Bills finished last in the East?
No, the Jets.
You could say the Jets.
Jets. I think the Bills can surprise people. I like what the Bills have done.
Yeah.
The only reason I say Kansas City is I see
no faith in Smith.
Yeah, and there's
Andy Reid.
I love Andy Reid, but there's the potential for Phillip Rivers, right? If he stays on the path that he had last year.
Yeah.
The Oakland Raiders have so many additions right now that they can only go up. Kansas City, they've lost people. I don't see them adding anything, and as of right now, they're it's one thing to stay the same. It's another thing to regress.
Yeah.
So even with Jamal, I know he's a beast. I don't know. I think it wouldn't surprise me if they do.
No, I wonder if Kansas City's sitting at home and wondering why they didn't take a receiver in the draft. Because out of the draft, that's one of the big things that blew my mind.
Yeah, I don't know what. That's the thing. I don't know what they're going to do.
I agree with you. They lost. They didn't gain. So, given that, and yeah, I have to agree with you in a sense, but Oakland Raiders, does Matt Sharp come in and make that much of a drastic change?
But that's the thing too for me is Schaub, despite last year and last season, he is a competent NFL quarterback for the most part, right? In regular season at least, I don't even think have they gone to the playoffs? They made one playoff appearance. The Houston Texans. It's not much, but
not a lot.
I don't know. Well, I'm looking at their schedule now. Their schedule isn't too difficult. But what do you think? What are your picks for the East?
For the East, I mean, of course, you got the Patriots up top. I hate to say, of course.
Yeah.
Dolphins second, Bills third, Jets last.
Love to hear
Respectively. AFC West, you got Broncos. Broncos atop. Chargers, Chiefs, Raiders.
Well, there you go, guys. You've heard it first on the Fantasy Riot podcast. That's going to do it for us. We're going to wrap it up. This went a little bit longer.
You can find me at Fantasy or Flight on the Twitter sphere. And you can also email me if you'd like, fantasyorflight@yahoo.com.
Don't forget to go to blindsidefootball.com, fantasyriot.com. Today is July 20th, so 10 days until the Fantasy Riot 2014 Fantasy Football Draft Guide comes out.
Boom.
So I've been working real hard on this. It's got a lot of articles, rookie analysis, sophomore analysis, free agent moves, rankings, team outlooks, injury report, depth charts, strength of schedule, handcuffs, sleepers, busts, bounce backs. It's got everything you could possibly want.
Boom shakalaka.
All in one easy to read ebook. Fantasy Riot, fantasyriot.com, Blindside Football, blindsidefootball.com, Fantasy or Flight @Fantasy or Flight.
Don't forget the blind side.
We'll talk to you guys soon.
Adios.